should note the passing of Councillor David Cox, whose funeral is happening on Friday, and we will have a full acknowledgement of his service to the city at the City Council meeting on Thursday. So that's when I will acknowledge that and call for a minute's silence. Given that this is an annual plan meeting, it doesn't run to the normal agenda of a council meeting. Right, so now what I'll do is I'll just outline the process that we're going to follow, and for those who've been through, I think everyone's now been through an annual plan process. I'll just run through the process again. So the first thing that will happen is that there will be moved a temporary suspension of various standing orders, the limitation on members only speaking once, the limits on the number of speakers, the general procedure for speaking and moving motions, foreshadowed amendments, lost amendments. So we will set those aside, and that enables us as a council to have a reasonably free-flowing discussion over whichever amendments are raised, and then the question. I will ask people to move amendments, so I'll first of all I'll have staff provide some updated information for us as we go into this process, just reminding people that what we will sign off today is the draft annual plan, and it will go out for consultation. The first group that will come in and make submissions on it are our community boards, and they are very deliberately at the beginning of the submission process, so that or the hearing process, so that we can hear directly from the boards in relation to the matters and the priorities in their respective areas. So the amendments are dealt with, and with each one we will ask staff if there is an impact on rates, and ask them to calculate that. That may mean that we have to take the odd break in proceedings just to ensure that they can do that work for us, and then we deal with each amendment as it's moved and seconded, and then debated and then carried. Everyone doesn't have to participate in debating every single amendment, and then we will have a sort of final break so that we can get just an update from staff about where we're up to, if it's necessary, and then we will come to debate the draft annual plan. And that is really the opportunity for all councillors to essentially have their say about what their priorities are, and about what they hope to see by way of public feedback, and what they hope to achieve in terms of this this annual plan, which is 2019-2020. And so then that motion will be put. Then we move on to the next motion, which will be the adoption for consultation, which is the consultation document, and approve a process for consultation, which I've indicated will start with the community boards, and there'll be public notices, all relevant information available, etc. So, and that will be potentially another debate, and then we will, and I think at that point we will re-adopt standing orders and declare the meeting closed. So the timing of this is it will just depend on how the debate goes, but I'm hoping that it will be a nice free-flowing opportunity for councillors to have their say about the draft annual plan. Questions? Yes, Tim.
Could we have at the start of this what the rates are going to be?
Yes, we're going to start with the staff, but we need to suspend standing orders first. So
yeah, I just think, you know, as we go around and we debate and we put amendments forward,
yep,
etc., and we look at those cost impacts for the public who are watching to see where we started with rates to where we end up is actually, yep, very important.
Yes, very important. Yeah. All right. So I will move the resolution to temporarily suspend standing orders that are listed. Andrew seconded. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. And now we move on to the main resolution, and I'll move that the council approves and adopts the information contained, etc., in the draft 2019-20 annual plan, and that's seconded by somebody, Mike. And now I'll hand it over to staff and ask them to perhaps present where we've got to and touch on the rates that we're at the moment.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good morning, councillors. So, just to give you an update on where the rates are for the draft plan, you'll recall in the LTP we had originally indicated the rates for the 1920 year would be around 5.5, but as a result of savings and additional revenue, the draft as it went out was at 5.02. I'm pleased to advise that we've reviewed the figures from QV which indicate the growth in the city, and so the starting point now for the rates for today's discussion are 4.96. So that's from 5.02 down to 4.96. And to give you an indicator, we had said that the standard residential property of around $500,000 had a rates of 4.98. That's now down to 4.92.
4.92. Right. Okay. Is there anything you wanted to add, Carol?
Just a really minor little thing. We had a media query came through last night around the Eco Central recycling processing fee, and we just a slight correction to your paper in 3.42 where we talked about not being able to ship that product overseas. We are still shipping that product overseas and continue to do that. So just a minor correction there.
Sorry, I didn't notice that because the problem is okay, all right.
So the problem is the increased processing fee, not the ability to ship offshore.
That's right. All right. So so now I'll look around the table. Oh no, I think we have questions first because I think there are a number of councillors had some questions that they'd like to canvass. So Yanni and Phil, Glenn.
Yeah, I was just wondering, in terms of the fees and charges, whether we'd increase the fees for the cruise ships in Akaroa to pay for the increased costs, and if not, why not?
They have been increased by a rate of inflation, which covers the costs, the additional costs of having a tourist there.
Are we able to put them up even more, given that that's been feedback we've had from that community?
The advice we received was that you wouldn't normally change but such late notice because a lot of the cruises have been advertised. That was taken on advice from staff, but who spoke with the tourist people. So, but they have gone up by the rate of inflation.
It just seems hard to understand. Some of the fees and charges have gone up a lot more than the cost of inflation. But these ones aren't, and we've had pressure from the community.
Very few have gone up by more than the rate of inflation, unless it's a very small dollar amount and you need to increase it to the next available coin. I think you'll find most of the fees increases have been very moderate this year.
Okay. The second question was just in regards to the development contributions policy. I know that central government were changing the DC's legislation so that we could put things in that weren't currently eligible for DCs, and I know that we've also got a growth fund that we're underspent that we are collecting funding for. Can you just give some clarification as to when do we review the projects that we put in that are eligible for that DCs, either collecting the DCs or funding from the DCs going towards doing?
Yes, you're talking about the change that's been signalled to bring facilities back in, because facilities at the moment are currently not eligible for DCs. We are reviewing our list of current contracts and ones that have been built to see which is eligible, but the legislation is still not passed, and therefore until such time as it is, we obviously can't make a change.
But things like local playgrounds and parks in areas that have had high growth, like Waltham, when do we as a council get the opportunity to put those things in?
They would come through in each year when you sign off on the annual plan or the long-term plan, whatever it is. They will include growth projects, and the DCs are reviewed after the annual plan is set, because we have a problem otherwise with trying to get continuity and reduce errors. So after the annual plan has been finally resolved on, the DCs are reviewed at that point to see what projects are in which have a growth component. So to answer your question, you get the chance to review it when you're reviewing the list of capital projects.
Right, okay, so we should do that as part of the submission process, put in new projects in areas like Waltham, which have had huge growth, that don't have projects fund currently on budget.
Already in there, then yes, you would be looking to review it between the draft and the final.
And just the final question in relation to DCs, the Central City 801 incentives review, is that going to be done in time to inform our final draft plan being signed off in June?
I'm not familiar with what you're referring to, I'm sorry, and I'm not the best person.
8011, is that what you're referring to?
It's just that I signalled an amendment, but if there's a stream of work going around that would currently actually review that DC's policy for Central City, then it's probably better to let that work actually do its course and come back to us to inform us on that.
Brendan, can you help out with that?
Speak to Councillor Hanson's question. Yes, the review on the incentives will be completed prior to the final annual plan being adopted by Council in June.
So maybe instead of an amendment, propose a note in that regard might be more appropriate.
Okay. Yep. No, that's fine.
And
yep.
Yeah, just the final question in terms of the capital program. There's a number of projects that we've put on hold that have been signed off by the community boards. And I just wondered if, in terms of communicating that through our capital program list, are we going to have community board projects sort of like we've done with the LTP or previous annual plans? Are we going to have a list of projects by ward with an explanation as to what's happening in terms of changes in timing and budget?
Yes, I believe there is a schedule of changes, and it will be by ward of changes from the LTP.
Right. So are we able to get any more project detail around the capital projects in terms of what the project scopes are?
I'm sorry, I'm not the best person to answer that question either. Dave, are you able to answer that, please?
No, probably. Well, we could get it. I couldn't get it now.
No, not now, but in terms of the consultation or the engagement, the ability for people to see what the projects actually are so that they can be informed when they make submissions is something that, you know, people have raised, particularly through the LTP last year, and we still don't seem to have that information available for people. So we've got a big capital program list, but if you actually want to click on and see what that project is and why it's a priority and what the budgets are and what the scope is, you can't do that, which makes it very hard for people to make submission.
We have distributed the information around to the councillors on those big forms, and I'd have to go and talk to our team. I thought we'd given it also out an award list of our capital program.
Yes. I think Council's asking for is the ability for someone to click on and see the scope list, and as we've said before, we can't do that at this stage. To have everybody be able to click on something and then read the short performer around it.
Right. So where we've got significant funding for things like car park renewals for Cuthberts and Cowles, we don't have any information that the community can see. Actually, that's why it's a priority. We did get a good email from Brent Smith over the weekend with a list of the conditions of a number of our assets, which is actually really, really useful information. You can actually see some areas that you would think, you know, if a community board or a councillor or a person in the community might want to make submissions on, when they can see the different asset conditions. that is not part of this draft annual plan document.
It is the intention this time to refer the specific, requests that come in from the community to the community board areas, so that the community boards themselves can see what their own residents are kind of indicating by way of priority. And I think the community boards will be able to look more carefully at the capital projects in their own wards, and I think have a better understanding of that level of priority. So I'm hoping, look, in the future, I think we will get to the point where technology will provide us with the solution that you're asking for today, but unfortunately it's just not ready at this stage. But it's very much front of mind, and I think the Chief Executive's nodding. It's certainly it's always been a priority to get as much information out into the public arena as possible.
Okay, thank you. And just to clarify, so the information that we got sent over the weekend, are we able to distribute that publicly to people to help them inform their submissions?
I haven't seen the information, so...
Sorry, I don't know about it. Mary?
That information was requested at the community board annual plan forum. That was just on recreation-based facilities. So that's all it was. It's not the whole program. But that was as a direct request from the community.
It's really good information. I'm just asking, I don't want to send it on and get told leak something to the media or to the community. But so I was just wondering if there was any reason why we couldn't pass that on to people so that it helps them.
That's what it is. It's,
what would be better is if it could be placed on the council website, so that I think it would make it much more accessible. I think if that was able to be done.
We could put it on and send a link out.
Yes.
If they want to distribute it.
Yeah. Thank you. Phil.
Thank you. My question's in relation to the uniform annual charge, particularly because clearly in the document, some of the fixed charges, like for example waste minimisation and land drainage, there's a clear increase in costs for those things. But it's not clear to me from the document as to the reason for the increase in the uniform annual general charge part alone, given that's a component of it all. I just wondered if someone might be able to explain that.
It was the result of a council discussion, and it wasn't exactly a resolution because it was a workshop where we were asked to increase the uniform annual general charge because it hadn't been addressed for a number of years, and we came back to you with 3 alternatives and settled on the middle one. So it's not a staff initiative, it's in response to a request.
Okay.
We can, and Andrew is here to provide you with more information, but I know the thing to recall is that while it looks like there's a big increase, a big percentage increase for properties worth 200,000, houses don't fall at that end, houses are more sort of above that and on, and Andrew can provide you with the detail of the actual dollar increase because the rates at that end of the property range are obviously lower than they are at the top end of the range. So in that case, what I'm saying is I think the percentage is a little misleading. It's better to look at the dollars, but we can give you those figures, but not right this minute.
No, that's okay, Diane. Yeah. So basically, though, there was no other reason as to why we increased that.
No, it just hadn't been addressed. It had not been addressed for quite a number of years, although we had increased the, which is also a fixed rate, we had increased the rate on wheelie bins for the recycling.
Okay, thank you. That's sufficient.
Thank you. Glenn?
Thank you, and thank you, Diane. That was going to be in the area of my first question, because at first glance it doesn't look proportionately fair when you look at the lower value houses. So it'd be good to have a breakdown over perhaps, e.g. how much a proportion of the uniform annual general charge is in the various bands of valuation that could be greater, for instance, than the lowest. That info would be good. I just had a couple of other questions. One that both around fees and charges. One is on page 162. I don't know whether you need someone else
afraid I do. I don't.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
I don't have memory
Well,
of every page.
maybe we can note it. It's a new charge, and
Yes.
it relates to traffic management plans. Yes. I have a concern over the potential impact of that on future events in the city, which already find traffic management plans challenging. So perhaps if we could have some info later, would be great, please. That's page 162. Yep, 62. CTOC real-time operations professional services new charge, $258. They all add up, and that will have, I imagine, quite an impact. The other is around burial plots. Have a distressed constituent who is saying that their elderly parents are not able to purchase a burial plot at the moment because apparently they've been put on hold. Now, I've looked at the bylaw, or the policy rather, relating to this. Could we have some information on that? Because I know there's some discretion in there, but I'd like to know whether that's
So it's
somehow...
not the fee, it's the fact that the plots aren't available that you... Is that clear? Sorry, just clarifying what I think you said.
Right.
It's not the fee that you have a problem with, it's the fact the plots are not available.
No,
I think Brent
it's
might
being
be
able
able
to purchase it.
I think Brent might be able to help.
Yep.
I think it's the pre-purchasing of them.
Yes.
People are buying them up in advance.
Yeah.
And then they're not available to satisfy our current need.
Right.
So I believe there's a whole lot on pre-purchasing, not on the sale of plots.
Ah, right. Is that a delegated decision?
I don't know.
Okay.
There are areas where you've got pressure in the city with burial plots.
Okay.
So can I?
Okay.
Yeah, can I? You recently agreed to a change to the bylaw.
Yeah.
And around cemeteries, and this was canvassed at that time.
Okay.
Thank you. Sarah?
A couple of questions, and on page 114, and I know Mary's got some information on this one, we've got some increases to the community hall hire, which seem like quite big increases. And I know that we're proposing to change the categories for some of these halls. But one of them, for example, at the moment looks like, so the new Woolston facility, which is quite a small hall, would just kind of fit 50 and would be going from $50 to $84. It's an increase of 68% for family groups in a low-income area, sort of wanting to do a 80th birthday party or something for a family member.
So we're proposing that this is deleted in the draft document. That's the first row of that, and actually at the moment we're updating the schedule of fees and charges. This didn't go through the sign-off process, so
these increases won't be going through the draft?
The first row of increases won't be going into the draft. That's where the significant...
Oh, so the significant one there?
Mm-hmm. So okay. the other schedule was what we reported today were about 2 and 5% increases across the facilities.
Yeah. So there's still 32%. I mean, it's only $16, but for community events.
Which...
it's on page 114 there.
I think it's the third.
There's the private social, the family functions, then there's commercial events, then there's community events.
Those whole boxes.
Oh, all of those boxes, not just the actual first.
All those boxes in that first row.
Great.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Great.
And the next one is on, next quick question on some of the maintenance on our water supply. I think it's probably one for Dave. I'm aware that there's some work happening to look at the water supply network and what work needs to happen to keep that from breaking so much. I'm just wondering if that work will be done in time to inform any funding decisions. So I think Dave's actually doing something else. Sorry, I'm asking about water.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. The work that's being done on the reticulation system at the moment, looking at, because we've got quite a high breakage rate at the moment, and I know at the end of last year we had sort of 350 calls a week for broken pipes and things, and at a time where we're trying to save water in our communities, the same, well, but we're letting it leak everywhere. Do we have enough capacity to be fixing them quickly enough when they do break, and B, when is the work going to be done to work out how much additional funding we might need to do more proactive rather than reactive renewals on the reticulation supply?
Well, the work has been done, and we did present it when we looked at the various options for renewal strategies. And when we did the LTP, we decided that we would actually put a renewal strategy that held the reticulation at the same level of asset class that we've got. So it's a continuation. So we're continuing with that program. Yes, we are getting more breakages, and we are putting in, and we're talking to the contractor to put in the amount of resources needed. We can't obviously not have those breakages. We're prioritising on things that need to be done immediately, 1 day, 3 days and 10 days, and so that should be done. And the last report I got was 92% within that 3-day category were being met within that 3-day category. It is putting pressure on our maintenance budgets because it's reactive maintenance rather than planned maintenance, and reactive maintenance unfortunately is a lot more expensive than planned maintenance.
So being that that's increasing at the moment, that reactive stuff, and it's really putting money on budgets, would it be more sensible for us to actually start putting a little bit more money on for that proactive reticulation work to, over time, increase the standard of our reticulation network, stopping the reactive stuff and actually improving our reticulation supply?
We're going to bring a paper to
that's what I thought there was coming.
You shortly
to
do with the whole of the water supply, because we do believe this will be another issue just around our future water safety plans, discussions we're having with the drinking water assessor and the DHB. Now, I think that's programmed to come at the end of February. I'd have to actually talk to Helen, but and that will have some elements that are beyond what we call beyond wellheads, which is all to do with reticulation and to do with reservoirs, etc. The issue that you've got, it's not actually a matter of just throwing $2 million at it here or there. It's actually a commitment to a large program if you are actually going to try and get rid of all that grade 5 and try and move from a reactive. You've got a little bit of a perfect storm. You've got the ageing AC infrastructure, which is, if we'd had an earthquake or didn't have an earthquake, it's getting near the end of its life. And we've obviously also got the earthquake residual damage. So there's a couple of perfect storm events there.
Yeah, so this report may have some funding implications, or we might decide there will be enough information in there that if we decide we wanted to get on with this program of work to improve it, that we will.
It would give you some guidance, but like I say, it's not a fix, an instant fix overnight. It's actually a longer term issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dion?
I just had a question around the Avon or Takaro River Corridor funding that's on the start of page 7. The extra money for 1.06 million for planning costs. Was that not included in the? It's an additional operating expenditure. Was that not included in the long-term plan? I just wanted to get an understanding of where that's come from. And also, you've got a revenue part here in 3.44 or 3.4.4 for extra revenue from the Crown for Avon or Takaro River Corridor planning, but you haven't stipulated exactly how much money there is for planning. So I'm just wondering if there's going to be a rates impact for this planning, whatever it is, or whether it's recovered from that extra revenue.
I think the intention is that it will be covered from that additional revenue.
Well, there's a difference between intention and is. I just would like to know, because obviously I thought all of the planning was done by Regenerate Christchurch, so I just want to know whether the city's going to be pinged again for more planning costs.
That may be a misunderstanding of the distinct roles.
Yeah,
so
it might be.
Regenerate Christchurch is the regeneration planning function.
Yep.
The planning function, as I understand here, is for the development of the bike, the major cycleway route that will traverse the length of the Takaro Avon River Corridor, and other elements of stormwater and various other things that we have to be doing to advance the development of that that area. But I do remind people that the Otakaro Avon River Corridor Regeneration Plan hasn't actually been submitted to the Minister yet. And when it is submitted to the Minister, there is a period of time within which she considers that that plan, and it is once it is actually gazetted that it becomes it changes our district plan to meet the requirements of it.
I think the point that I'm trying to make here is that why is that not? I mean, we knew that we had to do that, you know, the bike track and all that other stuff at the long-term plan stage. So why is this an extra revenue or an expense now? And has that been recovered somewhere by the Crown specifically in the extra revenue part?
Can answer. I think it's actually covered within the comment itself, which says that the information wasn't available at the time the LTP was developed. And you'll recall we actually did say we don't know where we are with the 300 million and other stuff that the Crown had indicated might be available but hadn't actually confirmed was. And so therefore this money here does say is to come from the Crown's Capital Acceleration Fund. So the reason it wasn't in the LTP is we didn't have the detail. Now that we do and know what the Acceleration Fund can be used for, we've included it in.
So that would come from the $40 million allocated part?
Yes.
Yeah, but it's still going through a process of, what's it called, investment case. It's not called a business case, but it's a treasury process called an investment case before that's signed off. So, and that's the process that the Canterbury Multi-Use Arena is going through at the moment too. But we have to prepare for for getting on with the job. We know that the money's committed, but we just have to get the investment case through.
This is a bit all over the place, really.
Sorry?
Well, I may not have described it accurately enough.
I think you described it okay.
Okay, all right. Jimmy.
Thank you, ma'am. Quickly, there's three questions. First question is on page 22, the funding source. The dividend and the interest received accumulate 7%. You break it down, how much percentage for the dividend?
Oh, you mean what's the difference between the dividend and the interest?
Yeah.
The relative percentages. I can give you that, but I can't give it to you right this minute. But I can report it back to you before the meeting's over.
Okay. The second question is regarding to the expenditure. You particularly emphasize $598.9 million. I just want to know regarding to all the regular maintenance, particularly for green space, reserve, park, and public works, etc. How much percentage or how much the funding for those to go?
Again, that's a figure I'd have to come back to you on. We've got the detail, but I can't just give it to you right this minute.
Okay. Last question is on page the 171. The capital endowment fund. The balance available for the allocation is minus 175K. I just want to know this minus where the funding come from. Is it borrowing or is from some other source of funding?
It's a variance to the long-term plan, so it's simply just reflecting the movement in the last 12 months.
Yes.
Can we just... it's because more money has been allocated to Christchurch New Zealand events.
Yes, I understand,
yes.
But it's a minus. I just want to know because
well, that's why it's showing a minus, because more money has been allocated.
110K, but the allocate is 285. I just want to know this minus 175.
What it's saying is there's less funds available
yes.
than we thought in the long-term plan because
yes.
more money's been allocated to Christchurch New Zealand than we planned to do in the long-term plan. So it's really just reflecting the result of the decision to allocate more money to Christchurch, New Zealand. It's just a straight arithmetic change.
Jimmy, if you read the three,
Yes.
so down the bottom,
Yes.
that the long-term plan said there would be 1.658. The annual plan 1.483. The difference is 175.
Yeah, I know. Yes, I just consider the balance, where is the 175K come from? Because allocates 285, but actually, available is only 110. It's whether it's borrowing or from some other project to transfer, to this one. I just want to know.
Well, there was slightly more funds available because we carried forward a slightly higher balance than we thought, spent slightly more than we thought, and that is the answer, 175.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's my question.
So, Andrew.
Thank you. Going back to the Mayor's recommendations in the 2018 long-term plan, and I quote, the O'Kanes Bay Water Supply Project will be funded through the LTP Water Supply Renewals Programme, with further work being undertaken on design and community engagement in 2018-19. Now, my understanding now is that at that time, the wrong funding source was identified for this project because it's not actually a renewal. My aim and motivation today is to ensure that this project is in fact funded and that it is in fact funded from the correct source. So would that's not included in this draft budget at the moment, isn't it? Would require an amendment to put it in there?
That's correct, it would, yes.
And that amendment would require $2.7 million worth of funding to be added to the capital budget?
2.6, yes.
2.6.
Not in this financial year.
And that would be in the 2021 financial year?
Yes.
All right, that's great. Thank you very much.
2020, 2021, is that right?
Yes. But not the 1920.
Not the 1920, which is the focus of this annual plan.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. David.
Thank you. Look, I'm very impressed that we've actually further reduced our rates percentage, and it seems that a lot of it has come from increased rate take on new build, and our projections for what we were going to get from rates has gone up. I'm a little just wanted to clarify, I suppose, in terms of our valuation adjustments during the rating year. I note on page 25 that rates charges cannot be changed to reflect the adjusted value until the next rating year. I'm talking about new builds.
Yes.
So what's the sort of impact, or do we sort of look at that on a we can't claim it this year, but it bounces into next year, and look, we've had sort of some unprecedented building growth in some areas. Commercial still going ahead at a fairly sizable rate. Residential slowed down a bit, but it's still up there. What is the impact on our rates from not being able to charge to bring these new projects into the rating system on an increased valuation?
The impact is more of a timing difference. Under the Order in Council, as you correctly say, we could pick up those values throughout the year, and therefore we recognise the revenue during the year. I don't have, I'm sorry, I don't have the number because we're not capturing it anymore and we're not monitoring it, but we are now back, the same as every other council in the country, where we, as you say, recognise the growth throughout the year and then build on the rates, build it into the rates for the following year. Because we, as I said, because we no longer have the Order in Council, we're not capturing it. So I can't give you the correct answer.
Okay, but it's a timing issue.
It's a timing issue.
If our predictions aren't quite right in this year and we experience more growth, we get the benefit in the next year.
Yes,
but conversely, if we get it wrong,
if the growth's higher than we think, then, as you say, we recognise the benefit in the following year. If we overestimate the growth, then we have we overrate, and therefore we have a cash deficit in the following year. which is something we try very hard not to do.
What we've done this year and have the benefit. Don't go too high.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions, Yanni?
Just on page 49, I see that there's I think it's a new project added, which is the Heathcote SMP. And I know part of it is to integrate projects within the land drainage recovery program and CCC transportation. So I was just wondering why that's got funding out so far away when we're doing all the capital works along the Heathcote at the moment, like the dredging.
Dave, is that something you can answer?
Yes, I'm just looking at page 49.
I was really interested in if there is a catchment, if there is a stormwater management plan, or whether this is a new project that needs to go through a consultation, engagement, needs a process to do like the Littleton one.
We're going through at the moment, we're going through our global stormwater consent, which actually does list stormwater management plans at a program that we have to go through. We've got to get them then signed off through that global. This is the program that reflects what we have put in that submission on those stormwater management plans, and they'll be updated. We do have them, but they will be updated. We've got to also take with us the community and all the rest of it. So just because of the resources of going right across all our catchments, we've got a program and priorities which has been agreed between, well, principally agreed between ourselves and ECAN. It's obviously subject to the commissioners saying that's right, because it we've just put in the last submission to them on Friday. We're waiting for them to see whether they've got any more comments to make. That will then go back to all the submitters and they'll come back to us. But what we've reflected in here is the timing that we've put in that.
So maybe it's better for us. Are we going to get a report on the scope of the Heathcote Stormwater Management Plan, Integrated Catchment Plan? I would hope.
It will.
Like when are we getting the report on that work?
Well, we will bring you a full report. Well, I haven't really.
This has all got caught up in the global consent. This is a massive task right across every catchment. Right.
Correct. And we will bring that to you when we get the final draft of the global stormwater consent. You'll have to say, are we satisfied with it? Are we not satisfied with it? If we're not satisfied, what are we going to do about it? If we are satisfied, then what are the implications? And in this annual plan, we've put in, I think, $445,000 to actually start implementing part of that, what we think is going to be the global stormwater consent. Right. But we will have to come back to you once we get that, and then we will actually work with you about all the various details, how we bring in all of the catchment committees, Ngātahu, all the interested parties, obviously.
Yeah, so you've had to sort of kind of estimate a certain value that we've put on budget in order to facilitate the resolution of the global stormwater consent.
And what we've also tried to do is spread the workload so it doesn't all happen in year one, so we have a huge spike of work and effort so that we can actually have a team that's working their way through, and the priorities of the catchments have been worked through with the communities, the objectives, and obviously Environment Canterbury.
That's great. I was just wondering if there's an ability to bring forward that funding to get synergy with the cycleway that's just been built and proposed to be built.
I think it's been reported already through Lynette that we are looking at any opportunities of synergies as those programs go through, and so we are looking at those and funding. And while Lynette's not here, our capital project manager, that happens on all of our projects where it's actually feasible to do. For some reason, sometimes it's not all feasible. Sometimes the projects are so different that there's no synergies between them. And so we are working through to make sure that we maximise the opportunities that do come on our whole capital program.
And just the final question in relation to the PT. There is money that we're putting extra for roading projects, and as part of the acceleration fund that we've gone in to government request for. But I note that in the draft annual plan, in terms of our capital program, there's 900,000 for the Palms, 800,000 for Eastgate, but then there's quite significantly more for other PT like Northlands and Riccarton, and I just wondered, are we going to get an opportunity to discuss the scope of what we expect for PT in places like the Palms and Eastgate, and apply to government as part of this process? Like, I just don't quite understand how we're signing off on the scope of what's suitable. You know, e.g. Riccarton's got the interchange and the separate facility, whereas I think the Palms and Eastgate at the moment would just be on-street ones. So
all the PT does go through the ITI committee, as you do. It's various concepts. Some of them go out. I think you've got to recognise some of them are for purely facilities around interchanges. Some of them are for actually street bus priority lanes, etc., etc. So those different projects have different scopes around them. We are bringing them as forward, as you've said, Councillor Johansson, to try and maximise whatever opportunities we can through this additional enhanced FAR, but that means we have to get them in the next 3 financial years, or next 2 financial years, yeah.
So the scope that we decide on will happen through the ITI committee to inform that FAR request, is that correct?
It will go through council, but the detail will go through ITI committee as it normally does.
Thanks.
Yep, Aaron?
Yeah, so just some questions around fees and charges. When does that come up for review next, of stuff that's not in fees and charges and some in there that could possibly drop out? Would that be during this process?
It could do, yeah.
And a couple to highlight would be like around sports, basically everyone pays to use anything from a rugby field to a tennis court, but we don't seem to charge for our water sports out at Lake Roto Kahatu, yet we need to put in toilets out there that are going to cost $1 million. There's no cost recovery, whereas in our other sports ground there is a cost recovery because a rugby team pays or a soccer team. So what's the plan there, or is there one, or when can we potentially raise that? Well, there's a lot of fees and charges in here for off anything from 136 down. You can go through all the different from yeah.
It's not casual use, so you can't book a lake.
Sorry. You can if you're on a jet ski, otherwise you run over the swimmers. Yeah. Yes, but are they paying? Because when I asked the rangers last night, they said they weren't. So
do you want to do that? Is that possible? Because so it could be raised during the process, but we wouldn't be able to adjust it today.
No, that's why I was just throwing it. I'm not putting it up as an amendment. It's just questions because
we could bring a specific paper back just on that whole question. But if they're already, if there is a lease involved, then that presumably
then that's fine. But it's just be good to have that clarified.
Casual use and the toilet provision, for example, is
for casual use. Yeah,
although none of the clubs have got toilets out there, so.
Yeah, well, going back a number of years, there was going to be the club was going to build a building, but most of the cost of getting those toilets in the course of the services.
Yeah, it's $500,000. The okay, so.
Yep.
Thank you. And then the other fees and charges is one is thinking of vibrancy in the inner city is the buskers one. Why do we have the buskers charge, and is it still necessary to keep it?
So I thought we didn't charge the buskers for the CBD.
Or for that was further down. Buskers come up.
What page is it?
I'm just going down. There's a lot of fees and charges.
We've got a lot of facilities.
So I've just skipped over gambling, property files, skip the dogs, resource consents. It's coming buskers is page 164.
164.
It says outside designated areas, preparation of licence and issuing, but do we even need it? It's just ones like that, do we?
I think that, look, somehow I've got it in my mind that you don't need a licence to busk in the CBD. Is that right?
We know some of it you still do. So there's some places you don't, and some places you do.
So I thought the CBD was specifically.
There's licences. There's still some places. There's a street performance permit of $37 on our council website.
Those are licences.
Yes, I know, but I think you don't need a licence if you're
in the CBD.
You know, if you're playing a guitar or something.
Outside designated areas.
Yeah, so it's outside designated areas. So who can answer the question on designated areas for buskers?
Do we even collect this? Like, how many people are coming in a year? And I know we have no busker police, but
no. I'm pretty sure that we don't ask for a licence in the designated areas, which are, as I recall, the CBD. Somebody must know the answer to the question, surely? No? Okay.
That's right.
If somebody could find the answer for us, that would be good.
And then the other one is we charge hair salons. I'm not sure what the problem is we're trying to solve there, but it doesn't say beauty parlours, and the services you receive in a beauty therapy clinic are a bit more personal than a hair salon, and waxing.
Sorry, where's this?
It is.
Isn't that under legislation, and the Leonie's not here?
Yeah.
What
page?
The compliance issues.
It's.
We've
this
had
one
this discussion before.
Right. Maybe not with Aaron.
No.
Yeah.
No.
This could go somewhere.
This is a former hairdresser, making this point.
Yeah. So they whinged to me, but the it's just that it only has hair salons on there, and of course we do bars and food
Where?
premises.
What page?
Which makes, I'll go back up. Sorry.
I think we can find out about that. I'm fairly certain it has to do with legislation and compliance under the Act.
And extending past hairdressing salons will be a completely new level of service across beauty salons. I think you mentioned brothels before, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
so,
we've got funeral directors, that makes sense, camping grounds. So they're all categorised together, that's page 156.
It's a legislative, I think it's something to do with legislative, and my advice would be to get specific advice from the relevant staff involved before considering any wider level of service.
Oh, and I'm not saying we go after the beauty salons, but the beauty clinics, but you've got one
industry
singled out that is less personal than a number of others, and obviously I'm assuming it's
these are all legislative compliance.
Well, who legislated that a hair salon should
other
have a licence?
premises requiring health licensing registration annual fee. It's the Health Act.
Yeah, so why is brothels not in there? I would have thought that you could get the odd breach.
Perhaps you could direct the question to central government. We're simply enforcing the obligations that central government put on us.
And the Prostitution Act doesn't require the administration of inspections of those premises. So it is
we do for hair salons.
To do with legislation and existing legislation versus new legislation that's come through.
Yeah.
My advice would be let's get the relevant staff to provide the
Get the
information.
advice.
Cool. Thank you.
So you think that because hairdressers are covered, then it should be all fringe activities?
Brilliant.
Sorry.
I thought we might be able to just shave off some more funds.
Clip the ticket. Right, okay, so are there any more questions? Pauline?
Thank you. On page 56, just the funding for the Northern Arterial, Cranford Street. Wonder why we've got the 12.5 out at 21.22 when I think we were going to have all the work done by the time it opens. So, that's a question for you, Dave.
What page, sorry?
56.
56?
Yeah.
I do 232.
Opening at the end of 21.
Yeah. If you remember, this is an agreement between us and NZTA that we are actually, they're funding us up front and we are funding back because they want to bring that project forward for us or they want to build it forward in line with them, and we didn't have the money, and so they're bankrolling us in the front end of it, but we've got to pay them back at the back end of it.
Oh, okay.
And so that's why it's not in line with the construction. So it's a bit of an unusual one.
Right, oh, that's right. I remember that now that you've told me. Thank you.
Yep, Dion?
I've actually just got one more question I looked at last night and thought I'd ask about it. On page 169, we've got a whole lot of reserve and trust funds, which was quite interesting reading in itself. All the little bits of pots of dollars that we have floating around for different things. I was like, oh, hang on. But anyway, the question I have is around the cash in lieu of parking. So we've got $651,000 in that, and the point of that, if you go to page 169, is to provide, sorry, I'm reading the wrong line, to hold contributions from property developers in lieu of providing parking spaces used to develop parking facilities. So we've got this DC's rebate thing that's going on, so obviously that's a development contribution for the infrastructure under the ground, which we are rebating at the moment because we've already built the infrastructure. But the district plan allows for properties in the central city to be built without car parks. Are we still charging developers who are getting DC rebates a fee for cash in lieu of parking? You don't know? I would like to find that out so that we can actually start addressing that issue, because we're seeing more and more developments allowable under the district plan to build developments without on-site car parking. But if we're going to be filling up our streets, we're having issues already in the central city. We've got this fund, we should be using it, and we should be charging for people in that respect
We'll check
accordingly.
with the staff and
Thank
come
you.
back to you.
Are there any other questions? Right. Well, thank you all very much. I'll open it up for amendments. Vicky.
Have two? Do you want me to speak from both or just one at a time?
No, you can. Well, we'll do one at a time.
Okay. Okay, so the first one relates to the report that we received at Finance Committee at the last meeting, which indicated that we were overspending in this area, and that unless we make some adjustment, we will be doing that again this year. So I think it's much better that we actually make the adjustment. This is clearly rates neutral, so there is no rating impact from doing this, but it does mean that we don't run the risk of an overspend next year. So we had a report on the in the parks area and in the roads area, and what we had done in our resolution was to make provision for not spraying Roundup, which you will have seen from the latest American case. Monsanto has been found guilty of causing cancer. So that we weren't doing that near the public, but we didn't increase the amount in years 1 and 2 and 3. So we have been overspending, and we got that report, and this is to rectify that situation so that we're not faced with that situation at the end of next year. And I've just allowed for a joint figure between parks and roads, and that additional 850,000 comes from additional rates growth, which I think is an incredibly conservative figure, and I think even Di could live with it.
Well, we'll just ask that question down the end of the table. So, I mean, this is allocating ahead of a review in May of the growth. So, are you reasonably confident that we could resolve this?
Check as to what the percentage increase is, if we could do that. Do you want me to do it right now, or do you want me to come back on it?
Well, we could come back to this item and debate it after you've provided us with the numbers.
Right.
Perhaps we could just reiterate our earlier comments though about prudence, and that the city growth, the actual growth, will be known in May. So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the last sentence.
Yeah, Tim.
Just to clarify, we need to ask questions of staff on these now, because in debate we can't. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes, that is true.
So the question, when we use the term no rates impact, it's being designed because we are expecting a rates increase to offset that. So you could also say that...
Well, yeah, an increase in income
yes,
from rates.
However, that also reduces our ability to reduce the level of rates.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, okay, well, we'll come back to this one. So, would you like to move your other one, the second one?
This is very simple, and one I think there'll be general agreement on, and that is that we are anticipating a reduction in the contribution to Regenerate Christchurch, and we note that staff will be coming back to us with further information in March. But what I'm very clear that we want to do is that I appreciate there's a timing difficulty in this, and that the report comes back to us in March, but at this meeting we're setting the draft annual plan, and I think we need to signal to people that this is a clear intention of the council. If we could debate, but we probably won't, because it's still to come back to us, the amount that we would reduce that figure by. In my own mind, it's around 3 million, which would be 0.65% reduction in rates, which on Di's figure this morning of 4.7%, 4.7 million being 1%, would be about a 0.65% reduction in rates, which I think people would appreciate. I think the important thing is that Regenerate Christchurch had a clear goal. It's about planning, and it was about its capacity to do various Regenerate plans. All they really need to have, in my view, is the staff to be able to ensure that that can happen, because most of the work actually in making those things happen comes to the Christchurch City Council anyway. So I think it enables them to do all the things that they need to be able to do, and signals a change in the direction of Christchurch, so that it's now more about getting on with things. And since we are currently contributing 4 million a year, as is the Crown, I think we can easily anticipate a reduction in that contribution. I appreciate the process that has to be worked through, so this is something that will come to us with information in March, but it is important in signalling to the public what their rates are going on, that we don't include the $4 million in our actual draft, in our actual annual plan. So I think it's important that we send a clear signal about this.
Right, and that's been seconded by Councillor Goff, so I'll open it up for debate. Yanni?
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree with the comments that have been made, and I think it's really important that we signal a process around this, because clearly we've got a regeneration ecosystem in our city which is very costly, and what we need to ensure is that the money is best spent on doing, rather than just, I think, on getting continuous streams of advice, and often from multiple agencies in the city, that are all publicly funded. So I welcome this. I think it's really important to get it done so that we can look at it in terms of our final draft plan being signed off. So very supportive.
Glenn?
Thank you. Yes, I do support. I suspect what we're going to find out is that their trajectory would match what we're thinking anyway in terms of operational funding, but I would not only perhaps look at regen. I think when it comes to the final adoption of the plan at the end of June, and when we meet to look at all those components of the OPEX which serve to get us to land on the final actual rate, that we look at everything, so not just regen, but any organisation in which we may have outsourced, or any agency, and we ask at least two questions: are they adding value, and is it measurable? So I think that's really important. You know, there is a lot of money going to certain agencies, and I think it is our job as elected reps to really hone down on these costs. Thanks.
Jamie?
I'll be brief with this, but very happy to second it. It sends a very strong signal via a resolution that the council expects funding to significantly reduce in this space. And to put it bluntly, my honest view is that Christchurch is over-agencyed. and we need to lead a step change in this space. We're going to be consulting on this annual plan, so let's see if Christchurch agrees with us.
Good. Andrew?
Thank you. And yeah, I mean, I think that what we've got here in this statement sums up the feeling of, I would imagine, most of us, quite possibly all of us around this table. There are processes underway that allow for this to run its course in a way which is respectful and quite possibly even planned. Clearly, we are only one partner in the Regenerate Christchurch setup. We have a minister who we need to work with closely on this, and the mayor and minister have a particular role around the statement of performance expectations. If we follow a funding follows function argument, then it will be logical that as the function of Regenerate Christchurch over the next period is determined by that statement of performance expectations, then a funding decision would follow. And we're certainly signalling very clearly here today that we would expect to see a reduction in funding that really would reflect, I guess, what we're also expecting to see in that statement of performance expectations. So I'm pleased that we've got to a position today where we can signal that expectation, but allow a good and correct and respectful process to run so that we can arrive at the right decision before we confirm the annual plan in June.
Thank you. Tim?
Thank you. I totally agree with this, and I think we have such a good relationship with the government at the moment. I think to go hand in hand with this, and I think it's been made clear by both parties that we want to do this, because it must be incredibly frustrating and confusing for outside investors and organisations coming to our city and wondering who they actually go to. So I think the sooner we can do this, the better. I also have a note of caution. We have been told constantly by our ratepayers that a reduction to the rates would be a very good thing and what they would like to see. So rather than, when we do finally get some reductions in our costs, rather than looking around like a lollyjar, that we actually start looking at reducing the rates and listening to our ratepayers. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll just add, I won't oppose this, and I really appreciate the effort that's gone into finding some language that is respectful of process. The government has made it absolutely crystal clear from the outset that the institutional arrangements are a matter for the global settlement, and I think it's really important that we work in the spirit of collaboration and partnership with the Crown in order to get a good outcome here. And I agree with colleagues who've said that we need to look at the whole regeneration ecosystem when we're considering these matters. So on that note, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you very much. So now we move back to our parks and roads budgets and glyphosate, which I'll pronounce correctly now. Thank you. Oh, have we got... We're not ready yet. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Yeah. Sarah.
I actually need to move that we get, because the community hall stuff is actually still sitting in the AP, even though they're happy for it to go.
Yep.
We need to move to get rid of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
So need some wording to get rid of the those first boxes. So the community hall's base charge.
Now, what page is it on the...
114.
114.
So we need to remove the proposed increases.
So can we... so is it all of the charges under Section 12 community support? Is it all of those?
No, because the bonds and things stay. It's the actual higher cost per outlet. It hasn't gone through the process. So it's that first box, the one with the private social events, commercial events and community events fees going up.
Okay. So the community hall's weekend event hire, they're all fine?
Mary, was the Harvard Lounge one approved through the process, or is it? Yes, it was. Okay.
Okay. So to remove the items, community hall charges identified on page 114, amended to reflect the fees and charges and reply, which has removed the 68% increase in charges for private social... Okay, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
So that's absolutely crystal clear. Mm-hmm. So that's moved by Sarah and seconded by Anne. I'll just put that motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. That's carried. Well done. Have we got an answer?
No, could you take a cup of tea?
Yeah. I know. It's 10:43, so we'll stop at 11. So what's the next amendment? Who else had an amendment?
Andrew.
Andrew.
So it's just the quick tidy up regarding O'Kane's Bay. I sent some wording through to Megan just a moment ago. I'm not sure when that's landed.
There it is.
2.6 million. Oh, so that's all there. Yep. Yep, fantastic. So I'm happy to move that.
Okay.
So just the 1, 2, 3 is fine. So that additional wording isn't.
Yeah, well, I'll second that because I feel like I was out at O'Kane's Bay and we were very clear about this.
Indeed. Thank you.
Happy with that wording?
Yep, that's fine.
Is this wording good? Yep. All right. So I'll put that motion. Oh, okay. Well, I'll open it up for debate. Sorry. Tim.
Look, totally agree that this needs to be done, but when we were given advice on this, the fund where it was coming from was actually incorrect. This will be a rates increase, so I would prefer it to have been looked at the renewals budget, the new capital works, and look at what would have to be shuffled around to allow this to happen without any rates impact. There's no question I support this being done for this community, but we were given incorrect information, so I would have liked this to have been readdressed through the New Works program. So although I do support this community and this work being done, I can't support this being an impact on rates. Even though it's not going to be this year, it's going to be next year, and that's just, for me, just moving the deck chairs around, to be quite honest.
Yeah, well, Phil.
I want to support supply of drinking water is vital. We know that as a council. I don't think Tim is saying anything differently, and I just think it's absolutely straightforward that we do this.
Yanni.
Question, should we not also consider...
No, we're in debate. Oh, okay. So do you want to couch a question while you're debating away? Or?
Oh, I'm happy to. I think we should be seeking external funding, so I really welcome number 3. I don't think we do that enough as a city. But I also think we should be considering going to the Regional Development Fund. This city, when we amalgamated forcibly were amalgamated with Banks Peninsula, have picked up a huge cost, and many local small councils around New Zealand are getting extensive government assistance. We don't tend to get that, and yet we've got a huge cost of a lot of these projects on the peninsula around the Three Waters in particular. So any support we can get from central government, I think, would be welcome. But I do agree, we need safe drinking water in our city, and I think this is part of the cost of doing that, but I think it's a worthwhile thing to do.
Yeah, I'll let you close the debate, but I'm just going to say a couple of things. So this was included in our LTP last year, and I understand completely where Councillor Scandrett's coming from in terms of the impact on rates, but the impact on rates is in the following financial year. So there's no impact on rates in the annual plan that we're considering at the moment. And given that it's 0.01% in 2020-2021, it does give us time to actually look for those savings so that there isn't a rates impact. I would be looking for a rates neutral approach in this financial year if it had fallen here, but I'm confident about where this falls. I agree with what Yanni said, because the Tourism Infrastructure Fund may not be successful, and it may be that there are other funds that should be available as well. But given that this is the beginning of the annual plan process, then we have an opportunity to look at what other funds might be available to support this. I agree with Councillor Johansson that this is exactly the sort of situation that you end in when larger councils merge with smaller councils and long-standing situations which are just not acceptable today, especially with the number of people that go there over Christmas. I think it's absolutely vital that we get this water supply right.
Can we put 3 separately?
Yeah, sure. Andrew.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this really is a tidy up from an overhang from decision making in last year's long-term plan. The reality is that there's advice that should have been provided last year in relation to the content of the Mayor's report, and particularly in the context of the funding source that was identified for this project at the time. We identified the renewals budget as the correct funding source. In fact, this isn't a renewal, and therefore that wasn't the source that should have been identified. So doing this today just allows us to tidy that up. I appreciate that there is an impact on rates in that out year, which wasn't anticipated when we made the decision last year. But the reality is we did make the decision, we communicated that back to the community, we have raised an expectation that this will happen. And over and above that, this is absolutely the right thing to do. I'm advised that this is the biggest public health risk around drinking water that we have in the city. Yes, there's a small residential community in O'Kane's Bay, but there's also a school, there's the museum, and there's a camping ground which we operate, which has 500 people there at any given time, where we currently grant ourselves an exemption around drinking water. So there's significant risk in the current situation, which is a water supply which comes from a natural stream that runs through a cattle paddock, which is piped through a community-owned scheme which isn't currently consented. So I think it becomes very clear that we need to do something about this. That's why we decided to do it last year. I certainly appreciate your support for tidying this up so that we can give the required level of confidence to the community that we're going to do what we said we were going to do.
Thank you. So I'll put 1 and 2. I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. That's carried. So Tim Scandrett. And I'll put item number 3. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you very much. So the other, Yanni, do you want to move an amendment?
Well, I just wanted a noting provision report.
Oh, right, noting provision.
That the council is currently reviewing the Central City development contributions and incentives.
A noting provision sent through? Yes. Yeah. Okay, note that the council, as part of the 8011 Central City Residential Program, already has a review underway, or take out the word already, so has a review underway of potential incentives that may assist further residential development described as Project B2 funding and incentives in the 8011 program. This review will be presented back to the Central City Development Forum and Council prior to June 2019 so as to inform the final 29 annual plan if applicable.
I don't need it applicable.
Okay.
It just needs to inform it.
Yep.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so that can be just included. I moved it, Mike seconded it. Mike, are you happy for that wording just to appear as a noting provision? Thank you. All right.
Can I just extend my thanks to Yanni with finding a very sensible way forward with that too? No,
it's a good way forward. All right, so I think that's all the amendments. So I might just adjourn us for morning tea. Oh, we're going to come back to the glyphosate. Sorry, I'm going to one day, Roger Fitch. Okay, so if we could come back here at I'd say 10 past 11, that gives us 20 minutes.